Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Happy New Year. It's getting a little late to say that, but I'm Diane Stanton with the External Affairs Department. We have Christine Preseno as well, co-moderating today. We just wanted to remind everyone that we are webcasting this, so if you do have questions, please wait for a mic so that the folks that are participating remotely can hear the questions as well and try to get the maximum information sharing possible. And you've got the CalSTRS packets that have been distributed. It's a very full agenda today, but we will try to move quickly and answer all of your questions. And with that, I think we're ready to get started. Sounds good. Okay, Joyce Lynn, our legislative update.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here today. And I have a few things to go through. You'll notice there's no matrix in your packet yet. There aren't a whole lot of bills introduced yet that affect CalSTRS, which is good, but the deadline for bill introductions is February 22nd. So there's still a lot of time for bills that may be related to CalSTRS and our benefits and investments to be introduced. So I wanted to start with the things that probably touch on employers less, and then get into some other pieces a little bit more deeply. So just to let you know, there are two bills that so far we have or will be taking to our board. So AB 33 has to do with divestment from private prisons. That went to the board last week and they adopted an opposed position on that. And an additional bill is AB 181, which requires a report on emerging managers. So again, on the investment side of our issues, and that will be taken to our board in March. And I'm hoping that if there are other bills introduced in the meantime, that we'll also be able to get those to the board in March. So we'll have positions going forward as the session gets really underway. And now I will point you to some of the pieces you have in your packet. You have two analyses. There's one that at the top says AB quadruple X, and then there's one that just says bill number and it's blank. You've gotten these before, but they are updated, and we've kind of talked about them a little bit more in depth previously. So I hopefully can move through them pretty quickly and answer any questions you might have. What's different this time that we've provided to you is actual draft language. That was exciting. So if you see the highlighted pieces, this is all the language that we drafted that reflects the two proposals in your packet. So they haven't been introduced yet, so you're getting an early view of the language that we've worked on internally. This is what it looks like when we draft it. It's with Legislative Counsel now, and just so you know, Legislative Counsel can always change things. So this may not be what ends up in the bills at the end, but it should be something very close to this. We work with them closely to try to make sure that the language indicates what we think it needs to get what we need done. But I encourage you to look through this. If you have any questions, I'm happy to get those today or via email later. But we wanted to share these with you so you can take the deep dive if you would like. Okay, and I'm going to start with the bill analysis that says AB quadruple X. And this is our housekeeping bill, our annual housekeeping bill. And the Assembly Committee will be the author this year. And so you'll see it start on that side of the legislature. And again, I've gone through all of these provisions with you at the last meeting. Just to briefly go over them, there's a piece on the front page about assessments with disability retirement and disability allowances. And so there's a clarification we want to make there in line with our practice now. And again, some of these don't touch on the employer side, so I'm going to go over them pretty quickly. The next on page 2, we're removing obsolete sections. And right below that, we're making sure that all of the adjectives in the law are modifying nouns. So there's some clarifying there, just fixing little things like that. And I would say at the bottom of page 2 is the first piece of the housekeeping bill that will have an effect on the employer. Hopefully this provides a little more ease of administration because it has to do with when a member applies for a refund, which you're not as involved with. But if they've worked in the last 12 months, we ask for employer certification that they have terminated employment. And we usually do that from the signature date, but their signature date may have been some time ago actually, so we want to change that to the receipt date. So when we get the application, the 12-month look back will be potentially a shorter period of time than from the signature date, which could have been 6 months ago, which means we're looking back 18 months. So I hope that provides a little bit of an ease of administration there. It's really not too big of a thing, but I wanted to make sure to point it out to you. Not too big a thing on the employer side. And then on page 3 is a pretty comprehensive cleanup of remuneration in addition to salary and compensation earnable in our statute. And again, we're not changing anything. We're just rewording some things, clarifying, cleaning up. But I think the biggest thing, if you look at the very bottom of the page where it says proposed, we are defining a new term, annualized pay rate. And it says that's the salary or wages a person can earn if they work full time. So that's what you already report to us, that you're familiar with that term, pay rate. Currently in our law, that definition is incorporated under the term compensation earnable. And there's basically 2 definitions under compensation earnable for different concepts, plus a description of how a benefit is calculated for certain part-time community college faculty. So we're trying to divide all of that up to make it clearer. And so part of that is this term annualized pay rate, which I think already matches up to what you're commonly using for the term of what you would pay full-time to somebody who works for you. Any questions on the housekeeping piece? Like I said, if you think of anything or if you read through the language and something pops up and you think that doesn't match what's in the analysis or what I talked about last time or today, just let us know. And then moving on to the analysis that just says bill number and it's blank. And what we're calling this one is our membership cleanup bill. Again, it's more of a housekeeping bill this year where we are trying to make sure the law is as clear as possible. I think probably some of you know with our membership provisions, there are a set of sections that are in the affirmative and a set of sections that are in the negative. So it's like, how do you mandate in and then how are you excluded from membership? And some of the language there becomes kind of complex and runs over each other. And so we're trying to make sure that's clear. Also, depending on if you're a cash balance employer or one that offers cash balance versus if you don't, there's some language in the law now that's a bit confusing. So we're trying to clean all of that up. And this bill, we're looking for an author. So we look forward to having it introduced by February 22nd, but we don't have an author yet at this time. And just to start on the first page, and this one I think obviously touches on a lot of your work more, so I'm going to spend a little bit more time here. Again, we talked about this last time we met. But the first piece really is a description of the thresholds for mandating into membership. You can see them listed there on the first page. And then on the second page, you can see the list of sections we're touching, but that description of what we're proposing to do is removing those redundancies, improving readability, making the conforming changes, removing unnecessary language, making sure it's clear which sections apply to employers that offer cash balance and which ones don't apply. And so that is a lot of what we're doing in this proposal. The next one down, it has to do with temporary versus permanent employment at the community college level. A lot of the thresholds on the first page are commonly used at pre-K through 12 employers. But at the community college level, it's really temporary versus permanent. And there's a couple of sections of our law where we don't have all the other education code sections that describe what's temporary or permanent. We're just making sure we include all of those. We've missed some of them. So we just want to make sure that's super clear. And the next one down on mandated membership dates for members who are employed 50% or more of full-time or permanent at the community college level. The law currently reads that those people become employed in the first pay period after employment. So we want to change the law to read that they become a member of the defined benefit program as of the first day of employment. And the issue we're seeing here potentially, and it's actually very few instances of it because we think people are using permissive election forms, or the interpretation is that employment probably begins when there was an agreement to work for the district. So nobody's missing that first month. But if there is an interpretation that employment begins the first day of school, then potentially their membership's not beginning until the next month. So if they start in September, perhaps their membership's not starting until October. And so we want to make sure September's covered because it's kind of a random month that's hanging out there where they're being sent to Social Security or some other program. And I'm not sure how difficult it is for you to switch people in and out, but hopefully if they can be in one program and consistently stay in CalSTRS all through those months, that's helpful. But we did some research because we understand that if they were in Social Security that month, there's a different level of contributions there versus if they're a member of the defined benefit program. So we looked at what we could tell from our data of who is in this situation, what's being paid into Social Security as just an assumption we made they'd be in Social Security versus the defined benefit program. And a cost for that month in employer contributions we found would be approximately $12,000 statewide. So for the mix of employees who find themselves in this situation, it's $12,000 statewide, so it's pretty minimal cost. But that's something I want to make sure to mention. That's probably the most substantive piece of this proposal. I'll stop there for a moment. Any questions? No? Perfect. Then the last provision that's mentioned at the bottom of page 2 of that analysis is aggregating service in multiple positions to mandate membership. So currently, it's very clear in the law that we don't aggregate various positions to consider somebody full-time. So we're making it clear as well that we wouldn't aggregate positions to get to that threshold level that would mandate somebody into the defined benefit program. So just a clarification of that in the law. Then on page 3, we talk about a few different situations. It's split up into 2 provisions, but about cash balance. And there are existing laws that describe who can elect cash balance and who can't, but there's not a lot of process in the law. So we definitely want any elections of this nature to come in on a form prescribed by the system within a certain number of days, so we make sure that we're administering the program as the law already allows these people to choose, but we want to make sure we're notating it correctly. So to start, as you probably know, if you're familiar with cash balance, that if an employer offers it, trustees for that employer can be part of cash balance. So school board members, basically. And so if a trustee wants to be a participant in cash balance, we want to make sure there's a process for them. So we are putting that into the law. Another option for members in the cash balance district who would normally default into cash balance, if they want to elect Social Security or an alternative retirement program, they're allowed to do so. But if they later wanted to come into cash balance, they can do that, but there's no process outlined in the law. So we're getting that process outlined in the law. And then the last piece there on page 3 is the law allows defined benefit members in one employer who pick up a different job that doesn't mandate into DB at a different employer. They can elect cash balance actually for that position if the employer offers it. But they can also move that position if they want later into the defined benefit program. So we want to describe what that process looks like as well. So those are all kind of in the same venue, if you will, but we've listed them out there a little bit separately. So any questions on that? Okay. And that's all I have for you this month, this quarter. Any questions that you might have about other legislation or? Okay. Wonderful. We'll see you in May. There will be a lot more going on at that point in time that we know of for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Joycelyn. So now we're going to move to the next part of the agenda. We've got David Lamoureux to discuss the governor's proposed budget.
Good afternoon. Perfect. Okay. This is rare that I come here to give you potential good news, but this is one of those today. So in case you are totally unaware, when Governor Newsom announced his budget earlier in January, there was a proposal to send about $5.9 billion of contributions to CalSTRS. $3 billion would be to benefit you as employers. So that's basically what's out there. And for us, we started to hear from the administration back in November, shortly after Governor Newsom was elected. We got calls from the administration. The first message that they told us, we would like to do something to help employers with their CalSTRS contributions. So it was clear that that was one of their intent, and it's, if you see the governor's proposal, it's there. So basically, as I said, $3 billion for employers, $2.9 for the state. So here's what they're really looking to do for to help you as employers. So The $3 billion, and right now, remember, a SIPP proposal, because it's going through all of the regular processes in the legislature, we actually have to go us tomorrow to testify at a budget hearing. They're probably going to be asking us questions about this proposal. And if something happens, if it stays as is, our guess is it's probably going to be adopted hopefully sometime in June. So hopefully by June 30th, we'll know exactly where we stand. But right now, the proposal is to send $3 billion to help employers. And what they really want to do is to use some of it to help the employers short term, and then the rest to reduce what we call the unfunded liability, to then also help the employers long term. So the idea right now that's on the table is to use $700 million to help all the employers with their contributions for the next 2 years. And then the $2.3 billion would be to reduce, to pay down the unfunded liability. So right now, I'm not sure if any of you have seen it, but some language, I think, was released yesterday as to how this is going to be worded. And the proposal right now says that the contribution rate for employers would be 1% lower for this coming fiscal year and the one after. So that's sort of the proposal. And then beyond that, when the CalSTRS funding plan was adopted in 2014, it gave for the first time ever authority to the CalSTRS board to adjust contribution rates. So we have yet to exercise this authority, and our board's going to do that for the first time in the spring of 21. So what we've been telling folks is with this $2.3 billion, we would expect that when our board sets the contribution rate for the first time, that it would be about 0.5% of payroll lower than it's currently expected to be. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the on the employer side. And just so you can see visually, okay? So when the funding plan was passed, I'm sure you all remember the days when you contributed only 8.25% to CalSTRS. This was before the funding plan was adopted. When the funding plan was adopted, a schedule was set in statute so that employers could prepare over a couple of years for the higher contributions. So this year you're contributing 16.28. It's supposed to increase to 18.13 on July 1st. And then it's scheduled to increase to 19.1%. So we are still going to be collecting these contribution rates for the next 2 years, but the difference is the state will pay 1% of it. So next July, if the proposal stays as is, the state will send us 1% on behalf of the employers, and then we would be collecting the 17.13 from you. So we would still be collected what's set in the funding plan and statute, but where it's coming from would change. You would need to send us only 1% less than set in statute. Same thing for the following year. In 2021, it's scheduled to go up to 19.1. So again, the state would pay 1% of it, and then you would be left paying 18.1. So that's the dashed line that you see on the screen. So the solid line is sort of what we've been telling employers and stakeholders for the last few months as to where we expected contribution rates to be. So now you can kind of see that. So if you're trying to give a message to someone about the impact of the governor's proposal, is you can expect your contribution rate to reach about 18% and stay there long term. That's kind of where we see it right now. Right now it was scheduled to go to 19.1. So you can kind of see. So if you're trying to get an estimate of how much am I going to save, it's really 1% for each of the next 2 years. And beyond that, you're probably looking at about 0.5% of payroll. Any questions on this? Yes.
So what I'm hearing you say is
Let's wait for the mic. Thank you.
Paul Rapallo from San Juan. And what I'm hearing you say is that there's two parts to this. Part one is that the overall rate that we would normally pay is going to be down by 1%.
Correct, for the next 2 years.
For
Correct.
2 years.
Yes.
And then the ongoing is going to lower it by 0.5%?
About half, correct.
0.5%. So when we expected to get to that threshold where we were going to stabilize around 19, it looks like we're going to be down to about 18.4 there.
Or 18, because now basically the world, what we see as the future is the dash line, assuming that we get the $3 billion. So right now we see it closer to 18%. The only thing, keep in mind that these are projections based on, mostly on the fact that we expect to earn 7% long terms. So these numbers are going to fluctuate a little bit. The good thing for employers is when it comes to us at CalSTRS, when it comes to investment volatility, the employer contribution rate does not fluctuate too much. The state takes on most of that risk. So that's one of the benefits as an employer. So we wouldn't expect that line to move too much, but it may end up being 18.2, 17.8, but you can probably, we will continue to update the employer community as more information comes in. But at this point, we're telling all of you like around 18% is what you can expect long term.
In terms of our actuaries, do we expect any hit because of our investment in PG&E?
No, not at this. And you have to remember, we have $220 billion. I don't know exactly how much we own, but it's not a large proportion of our portfolio.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and last thing, so the state is also planning to send $2.9 billion to reduce their share of the unfunded liability. Just so you know, contrary to CalPERS, we're a little bit different in the sense that our unfunded liability here is basically the state also pays toward it. While at CalPERS, you are solely responsible for the unfunded liability for the school employees at CalPERS. But here we have the state that has basically taken ownership of about a third of the overall unfunded liability, and they're planning to send $2.9 billion over the next 4 years to reduce it. And again, same thing with them, the message we've been telling them, you can expect to save about 0.5% of payroll long term. So that's sort of what the state has on the table. Any questions on this? If not, I just wanted to briefly touch on one other thing you may hear from us this year. So when the funding plan was passed for us in 2014, it had a requirement set in statute that we report back to the legislature in 5 years later, so in 2019, on whether or not the funding plan is working, can we still expect to reach full funding. So that report is due by the end of the fiscal year. And so just want you to be aware, we started to talk with our board last week about what we're going to include in the report. So they gave us directions. So we expect to present our board a draft report in May of this year, and then to file it with the legislature by the end of June. And the main message we're going to have to the legislature is, yes, the funding plan is working. We expect to reach full funding over time. And then we're probably going to spend, I think one of the things we want to highlight in our report is there are still some risks out there, especially when you look at investment markets that could, in some scenarios, maybe prevent us from reaching full funding. But the funding plan is working will be our main message. And with this, that's all I have for you this afternoon. Any questions? Okay, you've been an easy audience. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now we're going to move to our pension solution project update, and we have Tracy. What's the clicker?
Hello. This is my first time at the podium, so I have a little technical learning to do here. Yeah, I believe it's this one. Just on the right hand side. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Tracy Vedeto. I'm the new soft launch implementation lead on the Pension Solution Project. It's my pleasure today to give you the project's quarterly update. As a reminder for anyone here who is new, the CalSTRS is undertaking a system modernization effort known as the Pension Solution Project to replace the current pension administration system. This is the system that tracks members' credit service credit, and compensation throughout their careers. The current system is somewhat inflexible and currently expensive to maintain, and it also requires increasing number of manual processes, which has resulted in some audit findings, but also highlighted some opportunities for process improvement. The Pension Solution Project is part of CalSTRS' strategic plan and is intended to deliver benefits to both internal and external stakeholders. All right, the purpose of the modernization effort is essentially fourfold: to increase the ability to respond to customer needs and business needs, to enhance services for members and employers, to create long-term operational efficiencies, and to improve the internal controls and accuracy for CalSTRS. We rely heavily on employers to submit data to us and for CalSTRS to have accurate data. The schedule of the project is listed here on this slide. It's broken up into 4 rollouts. We are in 2019. This is the year for rollout number 1, so this is upon us. This is also referred to as the soft launch phase. This is the rollout of a production-like environment that's not quite production, but it will be the area and the testing environment for employers to test the new file formats. It's also going to provide an opportunity for internal and external training opportunities for staff and for employers. This will help us prepare for the actual rollout in early 2022 for the production deployment of the administration and calculation and payments functionality, the core of the system for employers, which will lead into rollout number 3, which is for members, and then eventually, or in the 2023, and then in 2024 is the rollout number 4. But what's right in front of us right now is preparing for rollout number 2, which we call functional rollout 2, or FR2, you might see it being referred to. And FRSL it refers to functional rollout number 1 for the soft launch. So when you hear soft launch, that is basically the testing environment for employers. All right, and now I'm going to hand off the presentation to John Meredith Simkowick, the Governmental Relations Manager, who's going to walk us through an update on the rulemaking process for the new file formats.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, everybody. John Meredith Simkowick, as Tracy just introduced me. Last week, update on the regs process for the new file format. As you all know, our current file, the F496, is incorporated by reference via our regulations. So we need to make changes to the regulations in order to get you all on board with the new file format and be reporting according to those regulations. According to the new file format. So last week, the board voted to initiate the rulemaking process. And in doing so, they had a very interesting conversation, and they discussed a lot about how sensitive they are to employer costs. So as we initiate the rulemaking process, we're also continuing conversations about the costs of what the costs will be to implement these on your end and how that might impact budgets. So those conversations are all occurring. We're trying to explore more about that and looking at different, ways to help everybody to make it as easy of a process as possible to implement these regulations. So also in sensitivity to that, we've incorporated some flexibility within the regulations themselves that I'll describe here in a second. But first off, the schedule, I just wanted to go, how do I change this? Oh, there we go, arrows. Okay. So with the schedule, the notice is anticipated to be published in March to initiate the rulemaking process, and that will kick off a 45-day comment period. And then after that, there will be a May hearing. The hearing is delegated to the CEO. The board directed the CEO to take the hearing, so you can submit comments in the 45-day notice period to this email address. So only comments that are submitted to this email address will become part of the official rulemaking file. We are required to address those comments, and the board will be seeing all of those comments as well. If there is, and then for the notice itself, we're going to issue a message over SO to let you all know that we've noticed it. Also, if anybody wants to sign up to be on a list that we will also inform everybody over, please email this email address and you can be on that list. So other stakeholders who don't necessarily get messages from SO can do it that way. After that period, then we will have the hearing after that in May, and then in July, if there are no revisions to the regulations, then the board would adopt it. If there are revisions, then we would ask the board to adopt it, I should say. If there are revisions, then it would most likely come back to the board in September. So that's the schedule for the rulemaking. There's also, I wanted to also let you know that the website .com has current regulatory activity. There's a section on the website, I can't go to it from this laptop right now, where we will have all of the rulemaking documents there. There will be a link in the SO message where you'll be able to find that. But right now, there's already, the draft regulations are on the website, and a document called the Initial Statement of Reasons. This is a document that informs the Office of Administrative Law about all of our rationale for the reasoning why we require these changes in law. I'll stop that right there for a second. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so then I'll go, oh, I'm sorry, question.
Hi, Rena, Riverside County. We've been working with STRS on this, and we were kind of ready to roll with it. But it sounds like, based on your schedule, that I felt like we needed to kind of have some test files by fall this year. And so this schedule seems like it's stalling that a little bit, maybe?
So, if I could take it. So thank you so much for being so willing and ready. So this is the formalized process in order for us to require these changes. We are hopeful that many of you are already working on these file formats within your current systems. And what we're hoping is that you will have a file ready for us to test when our soft launch environment, our employer readiness environment is ready to start receiving test files and working directly with you. Because, excuse me, we will then have 18 months to make sure that that's happening for all of you. So we would be looking to a group like yours to use for a pilot when we first initially roll out. And there have not been significant changes to when we initially spoke with all of you and showed you what those file formats are. I will, however, say that this process does include the comment period, and for us to really receive the feedback. And so if there are substantive changes, then we will immediately communicate that out to all of you. But Tracy will talk in a few moments about our assessment effort and all of the work that we've done so far to really be putting these ideas in front of you and be talking to you for over the last 2 years at least, and receiving the feedback and those initial thoughts and ideas about how we can improve the reporting for accuracy and completeness. So you'll see things in this most recent draft that have been modified based on your feedback. For example, the annual total compensation we know is difficult for many of you, and so we have added a clause in the regulatory package that makes that not required at first. So it's optional for this rollout implementation. And then we heard you on some of the fields related to expected pay periods. So we added in some flexibility. So I know we're working with all of you on follow-up assessments. We'll go over those details and as we move forward through this process to continuously talk to you and make sure that we're all successful at the end of this process. So hopefully that
Is it safe to say that we can use the last handouts that we received to move forward with development?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, and like I said, if there are significant changes or substantive changes to that, you'll all be the first to know. And that would be, so we want to make sure that you are watching this process as we go through. Then the next update at the actual public board will be in May. But in between now, as we're moving through this process, there will be an actual hearing on these regulations. So you'll be getting more information about how to plug into that process. But our hope is that we've done so much work over the last 2 years that it's already in a place where we can all live with it, and then be ready to start testing this fall on through the 18 months thereafter, and then we'll head into the training period for the actual go live, and then we're all going to be really successful day one when we turn it on.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to wait for the comment period also. So if you, hopefully you haven't been waiting and you've been interacting with us and everybody's seen this. It's been out there for a long time. I know that we've already made changes. So I think we feel that it's really in a very good place. So so I would urge you, don't wait for the comment period. You can do both. You can tell us now and then submit an official comment so it gets on the record, but we can all, prepare ahead of time. I think that would be best. So with that, I will, Christine mentioned a few things that I'll be talking about, but I was just going to go into the actual language of the regulation itself, not the file layouts that you've seen, but the regulation itself. So I believe in your packet, you have the board item, and on page TRB 15 of the board item, at the bottom is kind of the really meat of the change in our regulations that we're doing here. So it's section 27800 of the California Code of Regulations for CalSTRS rules, format for employer reports. I'm just gonna kind of go down it and talk to you about the largest sections here, the subdivisions and what they're doing. So the first thing is at the very beginning, this is where it says when they are effective. So effective no earlier than October 1st, 2021, but the board can say when it would be effective after that date. As long as the board provides 90 days notice to everybody that it will be effective. So that coincides with the go live for our rollout for the system. And so that's the goal here. So October 1st, 2021 is when they would be effective. And then subdivision A talks about our employment file, and it provides that the information on the employment file should be submitted either using the file or using the portal, the new SO, is that right? Okay, so the new SO at that time. And then subdivision, and then in this subdivision under B, where it describes how, 2A I should say, it describes how there's an optional field, which is that total annual compensation field that Christine was just mentioning. So that will be optional, and then it will be, the term of art here is we say that section would just be inoperative when the board notifies us, as long as there's 90 days notice, the board notifying everybody that it will become inoperative, and then it would not be optional, it would be required. So the board can make that a required field later is what that does. So the idea here is that we heard there were some issues, like Christine said. We want to explore what those are and figure out ways that we can make this something that can be gathered in the future, but understanding that right now there might be some hiccups with that. So again, it is something that we are looking forward to getting in the future. It's something that we believe will help not only us, but also you. And it will avoid future corrections to reporting, things like that, if we can understand the full picture of what compensation is and the total compensation, and we can look at what we're getting and we can understand trends, and then that way we can ask for corrections much earlier, and you're not hit with audits way down the line and having to provide us a bunch of penalties and interest. So that's really the goal of that field. And again, if you're interested in the intentions of any of the fields, like I said, there's that document online called the Initial Statement of Reasons. That really describes, why, the whys of what we're asking here. So, okay, so that's the employment file. Any questions about any of that so far? All right. Next, subdivision B is about the contribution file, just requiring that the contribution file will have to be submitted. Then subdivision C is a waiver. So this is a waiver process. We're building in 3 6-month waiver periods that if you're having trouble, if you having trouble meeting that October 1st, 2021 deadline, and you need to waive that effective date for 6 months, then you would submit a waiver to us, and it has the description of what's required to get that waiver. It describes there's you can re-up for two further 6-month periods, so you can have a total of 18 months. We really, we're working with you, so we're partnering with you during this process. So the waiver we just need to, it's continuing a dialogue. So there's the requirements are right there, and a big part of it is just the reason why you want the waiver, and if you have a plan in place on how to get into compliance. So, and then we can continue that dialogue that way. Does anybody have any questions about, and then the whole rest of it is about the waiver, and during that period, the reason why we have all this other references to the F496 is because it says that during that time you would use the current file, the F496, or the modified, I guess, F496, right? So, and I think that's the meat of it. Does anybody have any questions? All right, cool. Go. Darn it.
Wait for the mic, please. We've got one coming.
Hi, Nina from Orange County. I mean, it's related to this, but not from here. We received this email with tons of corrections. Because of this, you are, cleaning up the data. And it says only 45 days to correct all those people. And some of them, they are going back to 1988, before REAP. Some of the corrections were already made down the line. Can we have a updated file after you have cleaned up all those things?
So what Rena's referring to is many of you received a request to review membership dates. Of course, whenever you do a technology project of this size, we need to make sure that our data is as clean as possible going from our old system into our new system. And so one of the things that we discovered is that there are some members that many of us didn't exist back when they were reporting that have non-member lines reported with member contributions. And so that's inaccurate. Our system way back when allowed that for some reason. And so we need to clean that up because it won't fit into our new system. And so the proposal from our technology services groups and our financial services office is that, well, you told us that data, that is a non-member, but gave us contributions. So that money is not appropriate sitting in our system, and we need to return that back to you. And so rather than send you a listing of members and a check, what we thought would be better is to give you an opportunity to look at those lines to see if they were really non-member lines and this money does need to come back to you, or if there should be, that should have been a member line and the contributions are appropriate. And so we have a deadline that we have to meet in order to get this data cleaned and into our new system. So we sent you, if you had lines like that, we sent you a listing and said, please take a look at these, and if they're appropriate, you don't need to do anything. If they should have been members, make them member lines. And if you don't do this within the 45 days, it's fine, but you're going to get a listing. We're going to change them to we're going to make sure that they are reported accurately as non-member lines is reported and send you back the contributions, both your share and the member share. So that's what that fixes. That really is not connected to the new file format plus document that you received.
I mean, I understand that it's not, but because of the project, you're cleaning up the data. But some of the information when we were checking, it was already corrected down the line in your system. The corrections are there.
Okay, that's new information. So if that's true, then we need to figure out, check it off the list and check them off. So if we can meet offline, Vina, and if any of you are experiencing that in the listing that you received, please circle back with your employer representative so that we don't accidentally cause you more problems.
Okay. Another thing was if there were permissive election done, I don't know from where to find them, dated 19. 80 or something.
Okay. I do know that if at the end of the 45-day period, and if we're issuing you back the contributions and there's a member share, we will also provide you the name listing and the address that we have on file. So we got permission to do that as well. But let's talk after. Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? I will pass it back to Tracy then. Thank you.
So as Tracy's coming back up, I just want to say another thing. First, thank you to Tracy. Tracy actually came flying back to us from vacation so she could be here today. So thank you, Tracy, for doing that for us. Tracy is a contractor who we brought on who has a wealth of knowledge and experience in project implementations, and she is our employer implementation lead. So she has joined the employer readiness team that has been working with all of you for these assessments and in order to prepare us for the soft launch effort. So thank you, Tracy, and I'll kick it back to you.
All right, thank you very much. So if you need anything, there'll be an email address at the end of the slides. All right, so obviously you heard from John, there's going to be an impact to employers from the Pension Solution Project, and many of you have already been engaged and participated with us in our initial readiness assessments, which began in November. As you know, or hopefully you know, that we do have a dedicated employer readiness team that's part of the project that is focused on providing targeted support to employers to make this specific transition of updating and modifying to the new file formats in preparation for the FR2, the rollout number 2. So the team's goal is to walk hand in hand with you over the finish line as we go through the soft launch phase, through all of the testing activities in preparations for the rollout, FR2, rollout number 2. Last summer, our team conducted some pre-assessments with COEs and some of the districts and the school employers. And based on that feedback, we made some changes and we updated the file formats, and those were put out in November. And since November, our team has had a goal of reaching all 110 of our external reporting partners to talk to each one of you in detail about, number one, the discrete changes that are in the new file formats, making sure that everybody understands what they mean, why we're asking for them. We're trying to understand what your challenges are that you're facing so that we can develop mitigation strategies and approaches to help you and to support you during the soft launch phase. And based on all of that, we know that our population is made up of 95 employer reporting partners or reporting sources, but we do have 6 primary payroll vendors, and we've identified 9 third-party administrators. As we identify new ones, we add them to our list, so our 110 scope kind of fluctuates a little bit as we learn more. But that's where we're at today, and we have prioritized those 6 payroll vendors because they represent those 77 vendor-supported employers. So if we can help them get their files ready, then that's going to be helping employers who subscribe to those vendors. So that's part of our priority strategy. Also, we're working closely with the 18 custom systems because those employers tend to have some of the larger populations and report on larger percentages of the annual total contribution lines. So we're trying to focus our support and our strategies in the areas that we know are going to need the most support and will have the most challenges, but we do need to collaborate with you on an ongoing basis and to communicate regularly so that we understand what those are and to actually calibrate, are we providing help, and where there's gap, where we can remediate that gap over time. This is a long project and it's a long journey. So what we try today might not work 6 months from now. We're going to be constantly, progressively elaborating our approach and our strategy to make sure we're providing just the right support, just at the right time for employers who need it based on what their activities are at the moment. We understand that everyone will have a unique journey and will travel against a different timeline. So that will be challenges that our team will face, and we will work out some processes and some framework in our support model to help assuage all of those scenarios. So we have been engaged in these initial readiness assessments. We've talked to a lot of you, and we thank you for all the time that you have spent in working with us to help understand what your transition needs are. And so to date, these slides were prepared earlier, and so on January 18th, we had 68 employers that we had spoken with. But as of January 1st, last Friday, we've spoken to 78 of you now. So we're getting close to meeting our numbers, and we do want to reach out to every one of you. So if you are aware of anyone, or if you yourself have not yet had an opportunity, please reach out to us, because we are anxious to talk to you and to find out how we can best support you. Let's see. In general, from the assessments, I would say our team is very pleasantly validated in the respect that almost everyone knows that the project is happening. No one has really been surprised by, us asking for these initial readiness assessments. So we're happy that everybody's been waiting for this and already kind of laying some of the groundwork. We are also very grateful that everyone we've talked to is willing to pursue continuing to collaborate with us to make changes and to try to, as best as possible, to be ready for testing during soft launch phase. Although we do understand that every employer will have a different capability of doing that, and that's why we'll work with each one of you individually. And we do understand that each individual employer has to work with their IT shop and their own internal resources to determine their own best path and approach and timeline. So we'll be working, like I mentioned, individually with employers to determine a testing strategy and a testing schedule that works with you and that will help us all work together to make sure we can be done in time for the functional rollout number 2. So what's next for us? We're hoping to wrap up all of our assessments to reach all of you by the end of February. And then we'll be supporting John and his team through the regulatory process through the spring. And we'll probably be reaching back out to all of you in the late spring or early summer to start sharing with you some of the information that we learned from all of the assessments and to elaborate our probably improved implementation, training, and communication strategies from now through the soft launch phase, all of which have been informed by your feedback through these assessments. So thank you very much for that information. It was critical to us. And also we'll be working with you to more firmly understand when you think you'll be ready to submit test files. So when we start thinking about, well, what can you be doing between now and our next meeting when we're all here together? I guess our team would just ask that you continue to keep your business and technology officers informed. It is a long project and staff roles and assignments change over time. So if you know you have staff that are coming on board or who are going to be leaving, we ask that you just let us know so we can keep our database of our contacts up to date so that we know every time we're sending out communications or invites to webinars and so forth that we're inviting the right people and all of the people we need to. We would also ask them that, as I mentioned before, if you haven't had a chance to participate with us or if you still have outstanding information that we're seeking, to just email that to us or coordinate with us when you have time permitting. We do ask that you review the file layout plus that John described in detail, if you haven't, and to begin working internally in your own organization to plan for those changes, either with your IT shop or with your payroll staff. And obviously, if you have a vendor and/or districts, we ask that you contact them sooner than later, because that's just a little bit of an extra pull in your tent that is going to add some time, some collaboration time into your cycles. So we ask that the sooner you get that kind of established with your vendor and know what their path is, then that'll help you plan what you need to do more effectively. So our goal is to do everything we can to help make sure that you and your organizations have as seamless as possible a transition. I feel like you all have probably been working on this since 2015, and I'm 90 days green into this forest. So I feel really new to it, but I'm really excited about what is ahead, because we are now really there where the rubber is meeting the road. And so we're really looking forward to your partnership, and our team is at the ready to support you. If you need anything, this is our team's email box, and we all have access to it, so you can reach any of us anytime. As part of these initial readiness assessments, we have been trying to establish a single point of contact for your organization within our team to help you expedite getting some support and some feedback. So if you've already had a readiness assessment session with us, then feel free to reach out to your direct point of contact that has been established for you and your organization as part of that effort. Otherwise, there is one more slide here that says if you are interested in having CalSTRS present to your groups in your own organizations, please contact this email address in External Affairs, and they'll coordinate accordingly within the CalSTRS organization. Okay, how about any questions? All right. Well, I feel like I had a rocky start, but I felt like I kind of got into my stride there a little bit. So anyway, thank you for this opportunity, and we'll look forward to working with you soon.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, John. John also mentioned the regulations and the initial statement of reasons is on our CalSTRS.com website. So I wanted to just provide that navigation to you guys. So at CalSTRS.com, you can go to the About Us tab on the landing page. From there, you can go to Legislation and Regulations, which is a tab in the center. It's the center column at the very bottom. And then from there, there's a series of different tabs, including our current legislation. But then to find the current regulation activity, that's where you want to go for the regulation language, as well as that initial statement of reasons.